Hey there, and welcome to the Total Potential Podcast. I'm Cole, and I'm super thrilled to be joined today by my friend and really teacher. I'm learning so much from her, Judy Buchanan. Thanks so much for joining us today, Judy.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you. So, just so the audience can kind of grasp a little bit, there's once in a while in your life where you meet people and like having met them shifts you in some way. And over this past year, I've had the great privilege of spending a lot of time with Judy. And Judy is one of those people who like just shifts, upgrades for sure. Your presence is just really palpable and something I've been so grateful for. So I'm just thrilled to be able to share your expertise with our audience so that it goes not just fills my life, but can fill their lives too.
Thank you. That's so kind and such loving words. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all true. So, Judy, you have a very interesting background. Judy was in the military for 20 years and served our country in several places in the world, if I don't, if I'm recalling that correctly. Um, you're an unbeatable mind coach, just like Jake and I are now, and a Reiki practitioner and teacher, a speaker. I mean, really a dynamic person. You have so much to share with us. And in that vein, I'm interested to know kind of what your progression was from having joined the military, served for a long time, and then what I think most of us would perceive as a fairly significant shift to from that setting into energy work. So I'm super interested to kind of understand the arc a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So, going back in time, I had gone to college to become a social worker. So I always had this innate knowing that I was supposed to help people in some way. And so while I was in college, I was offered an ROTC scholarship through the United States Army. And I had no intention when I entered college to go into the Army. That was not even in the scope, right? Social work, going to go out and help people. No idea, but I have a huge adventurous spirit. I love to do new things and try new things. And they said, well, you can go to all these different countries and oh, by the way, we'll send you to airborne school so you can jump out of airplanes. And I'm like, whoa, yeah, let's do this. And so they paid for a portion of my education, which helped my family out. I'm the oldest of three girls. And so it was really important for me to find methodologies to support that. And I really enjoyed the concept of serving our country. And so I entered as a medical service corps officer. And actually within a couple of years, my husband and I had met him in the service too. We got married and we started to have our family. So I have two children who are now 27 and 25.
So cool.
So that was an interesting thing to have happen early in my career because I was a young lieutenant and had young children as well. So understanding the stresses that come from working a full-time job as well as raising two children, being married, and going all over the world at different points was very challenging. So you ask how I came to this healer piece.
Yeah.
I had very, very stressful jobs at different points along the way. I did acquisition within the medical arena. So I had those leadership positions, like I was a platoon leader, I was a company commander twice, and I had executive officer, and I was a commander when I was deployed. And so there was a lot of pressure, a lot of management. So from the work career side, it was intense. And being in the military, especially active duty, it's 24/7. So, the kids learned to get up really early in the morning, and when I had to go to PT, and then we found care for them at different points. But so that was challenging for sure. And then also deploying at different points. My husband deployed, I've deployed, so the kids experienced that as well. And when they say the whole family serves, it's absolutely true. The whole family does serve.
Yeah.
And I now also understand the dynamic of being at home versus being deployed, because my husband was deployed And while he was gone, I can actually say, I think the stress level was higher for me being home with the kids and wondering what was happening with him than it was for me to be actually deployed, which, yeah. So I give credit to all the moms and dads out there who are supporting their spouses who deploy at different points, because they carry a large burden. So that was a lot of stress that was experienced. And so how I came into this energy work was I had multiple surgeries throughout my career because my stress level was so high. So I was impacting my physiology. So I had things like polyps in my uterus. I had cervical surgery for not so good cells. I had some other surgeries for physical injuries. So like my right ankle and my shoulder. And so things like that popped up, and those also caused stressors within the mind, body, and spirit. And I had been working with Western medicine, which does a phenomenal job of putting people back together. But what I was developing was chronic situations. So chronic pain in my body, my gastrointestinal system was off. The pain in my gut was extraordinary, actually. And then also I had things like I was off balance. And I didn't know that all these other holistic therapies existed out there. And so one day I was talking with actually a dentist technician, and she's like, why don't you try acupuncture? And I'm like, what's that? That's when they stick needles in your meridians. And I'm like, well, I don't know what those are. And so I wasn't getting too far. Like the surgeries were very helpful, but in terms of mitigating or transforming the stress level in my body, which impacts so many other things, it wasn't being solved in Western medicine, because the option was, here, pop a pill to solve the situation, when actually it was somatic. It was in my body. It was the way that I was thinking. It was the way that I was experiencing the world. And so that began the journey of holistic practices and exploration. And I started working with a massage therapist who really helped me connect in with my physical being. And then she was the one that recommended that I go see an energy medicine practitioner in the form of Reiki. And Reiki is just a Japanese word that means universal life force energy. And when I went to see her, I felt all this stuff moving in my body. I was like, what is this? And now I had felt with acupuncture as well, but here this woman was just touching me. She was just touching me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can feel all this. So I literally got off the table and was like, I need to learn this. I need to figure this out. And I had one of those clear cognizant moments where you just know you're supposed to do something. And I had no idea how that was going to manifest into my life, that I would be working with clients in that form, and how it would transform my life and help my family, help my children, help my friends, with this new understanding of how everything in our body is energetic in nature, that then manifests into a physical form with biochemistry. Right. And I also didn't know how my emotions were dramatically affecting my physiology. And so that's how I got here. Was I always knew I was supposed to help. And then I went from being a warrior to, okay, let me help you navigate the emotional and physiological issues you're experiencing in your life.
Yeah. I mean, that's really powerful though, Judy, because your whole life has been oriented toward service, and that service has just worn a few different hats, and you've been able to take, even the fact that you went through that ROTC path as a way to help support your family. And then you went that path and there was that draw to adventure, but then that connected to a way to serve. And then that's just the coolest, most inspiring orientation, right? To just kind of always keeping the focus that direction. And the other thing you bring up, and this is a phrase that I have stolen from you, and I give you full credit for it, but as you were just speaking about like the way your body was experiencing your emotions and the stress you were under and all those things, you've often said, and this is the part I've stolen, is that the issues live in the tissues. And that's just like, you hear that phrase and you're like, oh yeah, for sure they do. Like that lower back pain, like that's something that's there. Or, oh, that way, like I don't notice my, my arm, like, oh, that's, yeah. So give us a little bit more insight into what that experience of like that, all of those, the emotions, the thoughts, the energy we bring in, like how that becomes part of our physical body.
Yeah. So, and by the way, I stole the issues live in the tissue too. So this is how it works. We educate each other along the way. So it's all good. It's just helping us to understand how our bodies do work. Yeah. So let's start out with the aspect that all of us are made up of energy. At our very core level, we're atomic in nature.
Yeah.
We have atoms that are moving throughout our body, and there's a whole complexity that creates our physicality, right? But what we need to understand is that if we have a thought or we have a feeling, because the thoughts and the feelings are both energetic in nature and they play together to then create a response within the body, which is biochemical in nature, right? So you might have a thought of, oh, I'm not going to do so well today, which is not a very positive thought, which might bring you into a feeling of sadness or not feeling well, which then generates and tells the body, oh, I'm not feeling well. Let's release chemistry to support that. And that chemistry then is within your tissues, within your physical being. And that can be a cycle. And so it can also be a cycle from the body to the mind. So like if you're not feeling well today, that could drive you towards having these not so positive thoughts. So it's kind of like this circular motion in both directions. So where you put your mind, your body is then influenced to follow. Where your body is, your mind is influenced to follow too. And we know this by, like, if you watch a movie, right? The movie is 2D. You are not in the movie, right? But sometimes you can feel as if you've gone into the movie and your body responds as if you are actually there. Just like with the new technology with the, I don't know what those are called.
Yeah, like those 3D, like those things that wrap around people's eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, simulation technology. The reason why we use simulation technology is because it creates the response within the body, which strengthens the neurons for that particular action. So in the military and in many different places, we use simulation technology because the brain goes and the body follows with response, with a biochemical response. So if we start to understand that, then we can recognize that our body has within it the experiences of the past. So we actually begin to recognize, understand, and interpret within our bodies when we are in the womb. So our cognitive capability hasn't fully formed until later in life, but our body it remembers its experiences in order to keep you safe, on track, navigating the world around us. So when we say the issues live in the tissues, there is experience that is living within the tissues because those biochemical responses happened that can show up later in life. It's also how we form our belief systems. Right. So I believe it was the Jesuits that said, give me a boy before the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. Right. And that's because before the age of 7, children are very much in the mindset of like semi-hypnotic, in the sense that they're absorbing literally everything, which is then facilitating creating their subconscious and belief systems, which will later influence them for the rest of their lives, which is what we all go through. This is what every human being goes through. So it's part of our journey to experience those wonderful things and those not so good things. But as parents, if we understand some of this, then that may influence us to interact with our children differently or facilitate them learning or growing differently, because that 0 to 7 age is infinitely important in terms of formulating who that individual is and becomes, because that subconscious is really forming at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can change that as adults. We can absolutely change that, but it takes a lot more effort than when you're a child, because they're in that brainwave state. So
Yeah.
to kind of go back to answering some of your question, an example I like to use to help people to recognize how emotion and experience can live within our body is when I was 16 years old and I had fallen in love for the very first time. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is awesome. And he decided that he didn't want to be in relationship anymore. I was like, oh, devastation. Right. And so what immediately happened, and it was so strong for me. I use this in an example because I just felt it so strongly, is my gut, my stomach felt as if he had punched it. Now he didn't.
Yeah.
He didn't punch me in any way, shape, or form. But the pain that I felt in my stomach related to the rejection that I was now experiencing was real. And so this helps people to understand that pain is not in and of itself physical necessarily. Pain is absolutely some emotional component too, because just that example of rejection, it created the biochemistry that then created the pain that I was feeling in my stomach.
Yeah.
So even when I went through multiple surgeries, even if you go through a surgery and it's a very successful, wonderful surgery, we have to remember that the body had just experienced trauma.
Right. Very real trauma.
Very real trauma. And with that comes emotions that need to be navigated. So maybe fear, body not knowing what's going on, maybe there's sadness or grief with loss of a part of the body. There's so many facets of how it all works together. But the bottom line is you cannot separate who you are as a person. We like to do this in our society. We like to say, is it physical? Is it mental? Is it emotional? Is it spiritual? It's all one.
Yeah. Yeah. So influential from one to the next. That's really powerful. How does one, let's say this is the first time somebody has heard about energy medicine, or even really considered that their emotions might be affecting their physical experience in their body. How can somebody start to build some awareness around what that experience is?
Well, as coaches, we've talked about the acronym that we use in the Unbeatable Mind, which is the WORM. So just starting to witness your physical, mental, and emotional experience is really important. So just taking a few breaths, stopping for a moment, because we could talk all day about the breath and how the breath influences the body.
Yeah.
So, just taking a few moments to settle and allow yourself to breathe and start to become aware of what am I sensing and feeling? Do I have aches and pains? Do I have heat or cold? What are the things that are happening within my body to start to work with it?
Super powerful. And then being able to witness the thought. So what are some of the other ways that people can build awareness around what's happening with energy in their body, or energy that they're giving off from their physical body too?
Right. So I think touch is really, really important. That's another modality that you can facilitate learning and understanding what happens in your own body. So, just like you said, you take a moment with your breath, you start to sense and feel, but literally touching your own body and noticing, what is happening with your heart rate? What is happening with your breath? Are you feeling aches or pains? We work with the energy of our body all the time, even if we don't recognize that we are. Like, if you hit your knee, what's the first thing you do? You put your hands on your knee. You're like, oh, besides swearing,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you put your hands on your knee. And when you do that, you begin to bring attention to that spot, which then also facilitates mobilizing your internal resources to that place on your body. So placing hands on the body is a really important thing to do, I think, to build that awareness as well.
Judy, what's coming up for me as you mentioned that is like not only with myself, and how, powerful that can be, and how I probably need to rework some of that experience. But the other thing that's really coming up for me around physical touch is like with my children, and how that, something I've been more and more cognizant of, courtesy of knowing you and understanding a little bit more about this, is like, when I hug my children, what is the thought I have in my head? There's times where, my daughter is like the coolest cat ever, but she is super sensitive. So her, sometimes with her, there's a little bit of like an emotional roller coaster. And as a mom, there's days where, I'd be hugging her to help her settle herself down or calm herself down. But then my thought is like, oh, why does she always do this? And I've really had to make a big shift around that. Like, so now when I hug her to calm her, I think to myself, like, you are good and pure and full of love. And, I try to fill my mind with positive thoughts about her that can shift my own experience. But then who knows, she's also maturing. She's turning 8 years old. Like there's, kind of a dynamic process happening. But I really have noticed like a shift in her as I've made that change. So,
right.
That makes sense. Does that,
it totally does make sense. So let's put some things around that first. That is really phenomenal that you're making that cognizant decision to change your emotional state before connecting with your daughter. And you're changing the emotional state by changing the way you think, right? Because the thinking influences the emotions, the emotions influence the biochemistry influences the energy of your body. So we are always emanating energy from our body. Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's a cellular biologist, talks about this aspect and how we have anywhere from 50 to 60 trillion cells. And each one of those cells has a 1.4 volt potential, which means we emanate a lot of energy. And the kind of energy that we are emanating is determined upon where our emotional state is, where our mind is, where our heart is. So you making a choice to change the way you think about the situation, and then that then changes your chemistry, which emanates this energy towards your daughter. Now, all human beings are also receivers of information in energy as well. And so again, Dr. Bruce Lipton, I love him in the studies that he's put together, talks about how the cell wall is where we have like these little sugar antennas, I guess, and those antennas are receiving the information, and then the cell wall is making a determination to let in the information or not. What's really interesting about how he describes the cell wall is he says it is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And that is the same definition for a computer chip.
Right. Interesting. That's so fascinating.
Right? So it's the same definition, which means that our bodies are being programmed and we're generating programs. And so again, you thinking about how you're connecting with your daughter is having a physiological influence on her as well, because you're emanating a frequency, and that frequency is being received by her in her cellular structure. She's reading it, and then that then facilitates her either calming down or escalating up.
Yeah.
Because we're all doing this all the time with not only each other as human beings, but we can certainly sense environment as well.
Totally.
You go into a place and the energy feels really heavy, and it tells you maybe you need to turn around and go out. or someplace makes you feel really good. So I don't want people to think, that they're crazy or woo woo. This is natural to who we are as human beings. We just don't take the opportunity to kind of think about that. And so you saying that she's sensitive is actually an extraordinary gift, because if she can learn how to work with that sensitivity, and that sensitivity really is the ability to read the frequency, to read the energy. It's simply that. It's reading energy all the time. And that's what our bodies do naturally for us. And in fact, our bodies respond in 1/64th of a second faster than our mind does. So this is another example I use. When I'm walking out in the woods and all of a sudden I think I see a snake, or I sense something and I jump back, and actually it's not really a snake, it's a stick. But my body responded without me thinking about it, because my body sensed what possibly could be there, and then I reacted. So that's that autonomic nervous system, which means, it's not so much our mind puts the context to things, but it's our body that actually responds.
Right. Judy, something that's really coming up for me as you say that is, I've been working a lot with trying to understand heart coherence and heart rate variability. And when I'm able to even just shift out of my thinking mind and just even like for a second sense that I'm in my heart, or like I'll try to think about like as if I was taking a breath through my heart, like my whole self shifts. So can you maybe put some context around like what happens when we get out of our strictly brain thinking mind?
Yeah, so let's even start with the power of the heart, right? So as human beings, when you're in the womb, the heart forms 6 weeks prior to the brain.
Wow.
So the brain, you can be brain dead, but if your heart stops, you're done.
Yeah, it's true.
So let's start with that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And then if you start to look at, they've done studies around the energy of the heart, and it is extraordinary the amount of energy that is emanated from the heart in comparison to other organs within the body. So they looked at how much energy is put out by the brain, physiological energy, right? And how much is put out by other organs. And the heart is extraordinary. I think I don't quote me on this, but I want to say it's 60 times greater than any other organ system in the body in terms of the ability to emanate energy. So coming and dropping into the heart, the more that science studies it and understands it, there is a consciousness, if you will, in all of our cells. And the heart is really about generating that love and that connection with others. And so when you're able to get out of that thinking mind, which also puts context to everything, so that's more of the ego, the more of is this safe or not safe, because the thinking mind is what does this. The heart will actually sense and feel what is the truth for the situation versus putting the belief systems that come with the mind in place. So being able to drop into your heart, you're now coming from the strongest energy center of your body, and one that is innately a part of the human consciousness. As I said, it forms in the body well before the brain, and you can live without a brain. You can't live without a heart. That's how important and powerful it is to the experience of being a human being. And, we talk about even falling in love, right? Or connecting with others. And actually, we don't cognitively fall in love with anybody. We fall in love through the energy exchange that's happening within the physical being of the heart. Yeah. So I hope that's helpful.
No, it is helpful. Something that's really making me curious about is, so when you're working with somebody and working through your Reiki practice, how do you help people like shift or recognize the energy that's either stuck or needs to move? I personally don't have a lot of experience with that. I'd be really interested to have a better understanding of what that looks like.
Sure. So let me explain this a little bit further. So when I start to work with somebody from the energy medicine perspective, I first help them to understand what's going to happen with their body. So I help them understand about the cellular structure and that we all emanate energy and we also receive energy. And that when we have experiences in our lives, those are energetic in nature. And so I'll use the example, like say you get hit in the arm. As soon as you get hit in the arm, your physical structure is going to constrict to protect you. So the muscles and the fascia are all going to go, they're going to contract down. So with that then also builds a level of congestion in the energetic pathways that are running through your body all the time because everything has just been contracted to protect you. So the body can, again, remember these experiences and we can build energetic congestion in different parts of our body related to the experiences that we've had in our lives. So what I'm doing with someone when they're with me is first facilitating them coming into a very deep state of relaxation. So when we have physical touch, part of my role is to help the individual's body, mind, and spirit feel very comforted and supported. This is very natural to us as mothers, as parents, to connect physically with our children. So we as human beings, we all need that physical touch in a very healthy way. Mm-hmm. And we just talked about how we emanate energy. So when I'm working with someone, I'm very, very present. And I'm really invoking that love frequency within myself so that is emanating as well to the individual.
Yeah.
So when somebody experiences energy medicine, whether it be Reiki or acupuncture or Qigong or any of those different types of energy modalities, they can feel different sensations within their bodies. So people can feel heat or cold. You know, sometimes somebody will be like, do you have a heating pad on your hand? I'm like, no, I don't. But I'm glad you're feeling the heat. They can twitch. Like I do a lot of twitching when I'm receiving energy work. So it's kind of like everything, my muscles and my fascia are just like releasing, so it's like this electrical stimulation that's happening. Some people see colors. About a fourth of my clients see colors because color is frequency. And some people have spiritual experiences too, because we're also spiritual beings in and of who we are as humans. So there's a variety of experiences, but my goal as the practitioner is to facilitate them coming into a very deep state of relaxation. Because when they go into that deep state of relaxation through this loving physical touch, they bring their nervous system into the parasympathetic aspect of the autonomic nervous system, which is that place in our nervous system that we feel supported, calm, and that allows the healing resources within our physical body to be mobilized. When we're in a state of angst or fear or fighting, and sometimes we live in those states, yes, then our body is not operating at its optimal level of healing that it could be if you brought yourself into that parasympathetic state. So, we go back and forth within microseconds within our nervous system. But what happens is people like me who actually kind of lived more in that sympathetic, which is that fight, flight, freeze mechanism within the body because of my previous experiences that I had or being remembered by my body. Yeah. I lived in this higher state of stress. Then my body wasn't operating optimally in its healing abilities. And so what I'll work with perhaps are our emotions or physical pain, or if there is a belief system that comes up that's really relevant. So this is not psychotherapy, but it is bringing awareness to the individual of what might be happening within their state, because I sense and feel just like you do naturally, right? And I've just honed that skill a little bit more so that if somebody's laying on the table, I might feel like oh, I'm feeling a lot of grief. Like I feel in my own body, like I want to cry because I'm sensing that person's experience. And so then I'll say, okay, can we work with that? And so from an energetic perspective, start to move that energy, and how we move it is also through the breath. So I'll have them breathe with me to intend to bring in nourishment and exhale whatever we might be sensing or feeling.
Awesome.
So you can do this as moms and dads. We all have the ability. So it's not like, yes, I've learned this skill set, and yes, there is training to learn a skill set, but it's no different than learning how to play a piano. We all have the ability to learn something, to learn a skill. And we, as humans, are naturally already working with the energy of our bodies. But you can learn how to amplify that. Just like you learn how to play a piano. At first, you start out with just hitting the keys, ding, ding, ding. And then eventually you're like the pianist, right?
Yeah.
It takes practice. So this is a skill set that takes practice over and over again. But it doesn't mean that as moms and dads, we can't be already working with our own energy to support our children, just like you did with your daughter, changing your thought process, changing your emotional state, and hugging her with that loving concern. Because now she's receiving that information and into her cellular structure to be read, that then creates a response within her body.
Right. And I'm just like, fingers crossed over here. Like she turns 8 next week. I'm like, I just caught it in time in this like first 7 years of her life. Hopefully this will be the part she remembers, like, in her body, right? That's fingers crossed what I'm hoping for.
Well, here's the other thing. I mean, this is challenging, I think, for all moms and dads too, is we all seem to carry some level of guilt that we're not doing something good enough for our children. But my personal belief system is that I truly believe that our children have massive souls. And, they knew that they were going to be part of this with you, I believe, my belief system is that we have I don't believe everything's predestined, but I do believe that we chose to come into experience with the people that we did. And through that, we are growing and learning as conscious beings. And so, as parents, we've got to let go of guilt or any kind of thing that we're not doing something right, from the perspective of recognizing that we're all learning in this process.
Yes, absolutely. The saying at our house is try your best and forget the rest. Like
exactly.
We're moving in the right direction, and it's going to take different forms, but let's just keep moving in that direction rather than holding on to the things we want to be different right now. Yeah.
And I will say one other thing about emotions too, because emotions have different frequencies as well. And since I brought up any shame or guilt, they're actually the lowest frequency in the spectrum of frequencies. So the more that we can release and allow ourselves to understand that we are growing individuals, all of us, that none of us are perfect, and we're all at different levels, and we're all unique. And so we just try our best. That's all we do, is we try our best.
Yeah. I really like the thought around sort of from a concrete perspective, like you said, like those are low frequency emotions, and you can like feel that, right? Like you can like feel the heaviness of that when you are experiencing those versus like how you mentioned before, like falling in love, like that has like almost like a floating feeling. Like you don't feel heavy and weighted down. You feel like full of life and wonder. Is there some insight you could give around, because I think that word frequency for a lot of people's like, okay, what are you even talking about? But I think we experience it so deeply. From your perspective, is changing that frequency, is that, I'm guessing it might be all of them, but I'm interested to know your insight on it. Is that changing that frequency, coming higher? Is that from the thought process? Is that from like really trying to shift or transform a feeling? Is that like feeling lighter in your body, being maybe more playful or curious, or maybe like, a little less rigid with movement? Like how do we start to intentionally shift that frequency up?
Okay, so you touched on a lot of different areas that all influence that shifting, actually. So like you said, you can start to shift your mind, your belief system. So what you're believing is happening in the moment, or what you believe you need to sense or feel. So let's say, as an example, we all talk about using gratitude journals as a way of shifting our emotions and also our physicality, because when we are grateful, we begin to think about being grateful, and then we start to feel it in our body of, I am so thankful for whatever needed to occur. And that energy, then that biochemistry and the energy is then emanating from you and facilitates you being in that state of being, which, again, that energy is a form of frequency. Mm-hmm. So energy and frequency are kind of in many ways, in the way that I'm using it, interchangeable. So you can use your mind, you can use your body, as you said. So you start to feel it, and then you bring in the thoughts. You can bring external things into facilitating, moving you into a higher state of being. Let's talk about listening to music. You turn on a good jam, and a good jam is frequency, it's music, right? You turn on a good jam, and then you're like, oh yeah, I'm feeling good. And so you start to, your body comes into coherence, or into that frequency, and starts to respond to that and raises the vibration within your body. And you're like, yes, I feel good with this music, right? So you can do it externally from you as well. And that's why we talk about maybe creating a space within our house that's very calm and soothing, because then that will invoke that calm and soothing feeling, which then draws your thoughts there. So it's not really one thing, because it all kind of plays together, but you can start at the thought, or you can start at the feeling, or you can start with something external that then facilitates you moving into that energy. But the one thing that I will say is that we all carry baggage.
Yeah.
Right. And so the more that we can become aware of what that baggage is, emotionally, physically, or spiritually, or even thought, thinking, mental, and address it, become aware of it, recognize it, and start to love it. Because a lot of people, what they want to do is they want to push it away, and what we have to recognize as human beings is that we're here to have experience in all these different realms, and that the goal is to not push something away, because when we push it away, we actually hold it in place. We're creating resistance against that thing.
Yeah.
So it's acknowledging whatever that is for you, whether it be an emotion or a belief system that's not serving you, or an experience from the past that's not serving you, and allowing it to be present with you and really working with it. You will then shift it so it no longer causes you angst or stress or pain or whatever, because it's now had the opportunity to be seen and loved, if you will.
Yeah, that's super powerful, Judy. My personal experience has been that when I fight something, it grows.
Yep.
And when I can hold it with a gentleness and some compassion and some love, suddenly it's totally different. And the thing that was painful or felt like a roadblock or an obstacle, suddenly that it's like my superpower. It's like the thing that helps me charge forward, because now I have a new understanding or a new perspective or a new like softness or sweet spot within myself. I mean, I've had a lot of experiences around that, where the thing I'm fighting, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that really resonates as super true, and something that any single person could really quickly take some action on.
Yeah. And I often tell clients just to allow whatever the sensation is to come up for them, So if they feel like they need to shout to get the energy out, then go ahead and shout, because, or if they need to cry, a lot of us have been taught, well, in the military, there was no way I was crying in front of somebody else. Okay.
Yeah.
So, we're taught not to express, and that therefore holds the energy in place. And crying is such a physical, energetic release that it needs to happen. In fact, they did a study with looking at the chemistry of tears when you cut an onion versus the chemistry of tears when you're releasing emotionally. And the chemistry of tears when you release emotionally has cortisol, the stress hormone, in it.
Oh, interesting.
So it's another way versus, the onion didn't have any cortisol. So it's another way for the body to cleanse itself of the toxins that have built up related to experience that we've had in the fight, flight, freeze mechanism, when the body releases all of these chemistry hormones to get you to, either fight, freeze, or flee. It's one of the ways that the body releases this chemistry. So allowing ourselves to cry when we really feel that emotional experience is providing longevity to the body, because you're cleansing the body of a toxin, because cortisol in and of itself is a very useful hormone, right? It's the long-term hormone, and there's other things like epinephrine and all that. But if it stays, it's not intended to stay in the body. We're not intended to stay at that high state of being with this chemistry pulsing through the body. And so it becomes a toxin. That's why this is part of illness. Whatever disease or whatever thing comes up, it's part of illness. And so I want people to be aware of how their emotional state can actually then affect their immune system too.
Yeah.
And their children's immune system. If your child is in fear and the epinephrine and the cortisol is released, what cortisol does is it suppresses the immune system, because you don't need to be fighting any bugs if you're going to be eaten by a tiger.
Yeah.
That's not what needs to happen in that moment, right? So the more that we can help our children come out of fear and stress, the healthier they will be long-term, and learning skill sets to help themselves, even putting hands on themselves, letting them work with their own energy, let them feel their heart, tell them to hold their heart for a moment, connect in, breathe slowly, bring the nervous system. The reason why we tell everybody to breathe slowly and deeply, right, is it because it calms the nervous system down, which then allows the biochemistry to come in place to help heal the body. I mean, this is how it all works.
Oh, it's so fascinating. And I love how just sort of simple it can be to start, and that we can take these very simple actions, especially as parents and with our kids. Wow. And I think I'll probably have like a cry fest later, like just to make sure that everything is released out.
The other thing with kids that I will say too, that is very helpful, is it doesn't just have to be a hug, right? If someone, like if my child has an upset stomach, I gently put my hand on their stomach, and I intend for them to receive loving energy, and they'll feel it because they haven't, you asked a question on a different conversation about, do children feel differently than adults? And I personally think they have a higher level of sensitivity, because they haven't been clouded yet by the energy of accumulating injury or whatever over their life. And the bigger issue is belief system around communication, because children are so open. And so I do believe that they sense energy at a higher level, because they haven't built barriers energetically or walls energetically to what the experience is. So we as humans can prevent energy coming into us as well. We can put walls up. That's what people prevent other people from coming close to them emotionally,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I do think there is a difference.
It's really actually kind of sweet to think about. Um, I think as parents, we often take on that role of like, oh, I'm supposed to teach you this. I'm supposed to, help you cultivate your manners, supposed to, all these little like roads we're supposed to get our kids pointed on. And as you're saying that, I'm like, maybe what my kids need is space. Maybe they don't need as many roads. Maybe they need some wide open territory to be so much more connected in like exactly who they are.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because we limit, I think, I didn't come into this knowledge until after my children were well beyond that stage, right?
Sure.
Um, but I do believe that what you're saying is absolutely true, that they need the space to explore their unique capabilities, and that sometimes in us providing the answers to everything or telling them how they need to do this or that limits their ability to really expand into the capabilities that we don't know that they may have in their
Yeah.
skill sets,
Yeah.
in the way they think about stuff, in the way they experience the world. They were
Yeah.
all, we're all we all have gifts. We all have things that we've come here to work with, to facilitate and help others with, as well as to help ourselves with. And what can be extraordinarily limiting is the belief of whatever's been imparted by society or by our parents or by friends. It can be by media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have lots of influences for sure.
Yes.
Judy, one last thing I'd really like to, um, I just think this is so fascinating and you are able to articulate it so well. So you have mentioned to me in the past this energy center, like through our hands.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been really impactful as I think about interacting with my children and not necessarily with physical touch. Like I've started thinking about that, like when I prepare meals, like how are my hands like transmitting this thing that they're going to ingest? So I would just really love to hear you expound upon that a little bit.
Yeah, so there are some significant energy centers in our body, and one of which is the hands. And people talk about energy centers, and then in some traditions they call them chakras as well. So there are palm energy centers. There's of course a ton of nerve endings, and many of the meridians, the energy pathways in our body, begin or end and in the hands in some form. So, trying to understand how I was working with people energetically, because it's either hands-on or above the person, I went to do a little bit of research to figure out, okay, I feel this stuff. I know something's happening. Okay. But I don't really know because I'm a very logical person. Right. So there has been a study with a squid magnetometer. I'm saying that correctly. Which science has discovered that all tissues and organs, they produce a specific magnetic pulsation. And so Dr. John Zimmerman showed that the frequency pulsations from energy practitioners, people who are using their hands to facilitate changing the energy or shifting the energy of another, that it sweeps up and down when it's coming from the body from 3.3 to 30 hertz. These biomagnetic pulsations are coming from the hands. Interesting. I made a connection. This is not scientifically proven, but that is very, very much in alignment with the brain waves. The alpha, the delta, the gamma, the theta brain waves. So
totally.
Yeah. So you having this intention when you are cooking your food, knowing now that naturally the body emanates energy and that your thoughts create the biochemical reaction, which then generates a particular frequency based upon that, then having that conscious thought of, I'm loving this and I'm doing this for nourishing is really impactful, because we know that the body emanates this energy and that other objects can be influenced by that energy. I mean, we can jump quickly over to the water study.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating.
Which, there's water in the food, right? And there's 60 to 80% water in our body, which depending on the organ system. But the study was that they took water from a Japanese pond and put it into different dishes, and then emanated a thought, which created the emotion with it. And what they did was he froze it, and then he looked at it under a microscope, and you could see how the water was influenced by that energy. So, feelings of like your I hate you, or it's evil, show up as really nasty looking, or on the screen, and I love you shows up as this beautiful snowflake. You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So, that thought, which emanated from his body, influenced the water. So you going back to this whole, kind of rounding it all out and saying, when you're working with your hands, you are emanating energy from your body. So be conscious of what you're thinking, be conscious of what you're feeling, because it does have an influence on other physical structures.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's all so fascinating. And I think one of the coolest parts of even like tiptoeing into understanding this area is that like it can kind of, you can get yourself going, like you can feel the difference. You can, like even in the example I gave with my daughter, like honestly, even if her reaction wasn't different, which it is, but even if her reaction wasn't different, I would feel totally different.
Yes. Yes.
And it's like, that's enough. Even just that one tiptoe, like that one change, that I don't feel stressed and anxious and overwhelmed by handling what's going on with her. Even that alone is enough. So just the opportunity to kind of like take some steps into it, and just like we kind of talked about at the beginning, like put some distance to notice what is happening. What did I think? What did I feel? How did my body respond? I mean, there's just so much power in that awareness aspect, even if somebody's not maybe ready to go to a practitioner, or not, doesn't have one in their area, or whatever it might be. It's possible to start making those shifts on your own.
Absolutely. And I really, really believe that we need to focus. The most courageous people are those that are willing to work on themselves and go into their pain and their hurt. Because when you shift you facilitate shifting everybody around you, because you're emanating from your own physical being. So moms and dads, the more that they can support and heal themselves or work through their own issues and concerns, the better it is for their children, because they're influencing their children with their energy. And oh, by the way, you're also influencing the next generations, because their sperm and their egg has already been formed, right?
Yeah.
So your grandbabies are connected energetically already.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Oh, we could talk days on this stuff.
I know. It's, there's been a few times where I've looked at my husband over the past few years. We've both kind of been on our own paths and dug into our own stuff. And we've looked at each other, and I've just been like, you know what, this is really uncomfortable right now. Like, it's really kind of, it shifts so much of you that it can feel like almost like you're not in your own body, or, really you can almost feel the rewiring. But I've looked at him and been like, we are healing this in our lines. Like, this stops here. It doesn't keep going. And like, that is maybe the greatest gift we can even try to give our children.
That is absolutely true. That is the greatest gift that you can give. Breaking the patterns of the past so that they're not influencing the future. Absolutely. Yeah. That takes extraordinary courage to break those patterns.
Yeah. And now people will have some awareness around how to, step into that. So that's pretty exciting. I'm so grateful to you, Judy, for being here with us today. Yeah, we might have to do this again and talk about the whole
Yeah, I love this stuff. Because I love learning about it. I love teaching people about it. And just like you said, just allowing them to have the awareness, just planting a seed to know that these technologies, if you will, energy medicine in many different forms are out there, and that it can be extraordinarily helpful for people in any capacity, whether they're an infant or an elderly person, whether they're healthy or they're ill. It's really helpful for them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. If someone is interested in either learning more or having like you speak at an event or something like that, how should people go about finding you?
Sure. The way that they can connect with me is I have a webpage and it's just my name. It's really www and then it's dot and it's Judy, Judy, and then a dash and Buchanan, BUCHANAN.com. So that's probably the easiest way that they can get a hold of me and find out more about energy medicine. I am a Reiki teacher, and then I'm also an unbeatable mind coach. And I work with my local police academy as well, doing resiliency training. So anything around what we've talked about today that I can help moms or dads out, I'm happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include your website in our show notes. And again, thank you so, so much for being with us today. And we'll have to catch you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.